Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to talk about a really interesting topic. Sometimes when we want to send like fruit or a specific thing for another country, we need to understand and know about some requirements, some certifications, some access limitations, or things that we need to understand in order to avoid inconvenience or avoid issues. So, with that line, today we are going to talk grapes when they are going to be exported from Peru to Norway.
The export of fresh grapes is one of the most representative activities of the Peruvian agriculture export sector, thanks to its favorable climate, agricultural technology, and off-season production capacity. Peru has positioned itself among the world's leading exporters, extending our for the quality, diversity, and its varieties. The European market, and Norway in particular, represents an attractive opportunity due to its high consumption levels, demanding quality standards, preference for sustainable products. However, accessing these markets strict compliance with technical, sanitary, and traceability requirements established by the Norwegian authorities and aligned with the European Union regulation. These reports aims to analyze the technical and regulatory requirements for exporting Peruvian grapes to Norway, identifying the main standards, control bodies, and challenges the companies face. It also seeks to highlight the importance of complying with this regulation as a competitive advantage for the strengthening Peru's presence in international markets. Well, in the research objective, this report aims to analyze the technical and regulatory requirements that Peruvian companies must meet to export fresh grapes to the Norwegian market. Accordingly, the following specific objectives are established. First, 25 the main access requirements established by Norway for the importation of grapes from Peru, including sanitary, phytosanitary, and liability aspects. Second, to examine the relevant international standards, norm, and accreditation bodies in both in the country of origin, Peru, and destination country, Norway. Third, to propose a strategic recommendation that enable Peruvian exporters to strengthen their competitive and ensure effective compliance with the standards required to enter and remain in the Norwegian market.
In a section on literature review, much of the research and access requirement for food products not only cover framework and theories about market barrier, but also highlight the dual role of institutions in international trade. In this sense, small and medium-sized enterprises often perceive this requirement as significant obstacles since they limit their ability to expand internationally and reduce the chances of remaining competitive in global markets. Moreover, Mascus et al. In 2005 implied that when the technical and health standards are not harmonized across countries, compliance costs tend to rise considerably, and this situation affects the small and medium-sized enterprises. In addition, ADA certifications such as the ISO 9001 or the CE mark are seen as essential for entering regulated markets. However, it's important to emphasize that obtaining this certification represents not only a financial burden, but also a complex administrative challenge for smaller firms. In the context of Peru, a study by Vera Hill and Rodriguez in 2019 highlighted the role of INACAL or National Quality Institute, which manage access requirements together with international organizations like ISO, Codex Alimentarius, and the FDA. This institute forces local companies to adapt to global standards in order to compete. At the same time, Swain in 2010 points out the accreditation body perform a double role. On the one hand, they build trust and facilitate interoperability in international trade, yet on the other hand, they raise entry requirements and increase the pressure on the small and medium-sized enterprises, which often lack sufficient resources to comply. Finally, Huckman in 2014 warned that developing countries face great difficulties in aligning their technical system with international standards. This restricts their access to global markets and widen the competitive gap with large corporations.
So, to begin with access requirements, we have to set that this is the combination of rules, standards, and market expectations that an exporter must meet for their products to legally and successfully enter a foreign market country. These include not only government regulations but also private standards set by industry groups and buyers. For Peru, compliance begins with the Servicio Nacional de Sanidad Agraria, which is SENASA, which is responsible for verifying that grapes meet phytosanitary and traceability protocols. SENASA follows guidelines from the International Plant Protection Convention, which is the IPPC, which you can see. including pest risk analysis, monitoring, and certificate packaging procedures. In the case of Peruvian grapes exports to Norway, these access requirements are shaped by both national and international institutions in Peru. Apart from SENASA, other relevant entities include the National Institute for the Defense of Competitions and the Protection of Intellectual Property, which is INDECOPI, the National Quality Institute of INACAL, and the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Tourism, which is MINCETUR. Meanwhile, in the European side, Norway follows European Economic Area rules and aligns with the EU regulations such as, for example, Regulation number 852/2004 on food hygiene, Regulations number 396/2005 on maximum pesticides residues, and Regulations number 1169/2011 on consumer food information. Although Norway is not an EU member, it applies its standards through collaboration with the European Free Trade Association and Norwegian Food Safety Authority under the Ministry of Agriculture and Food. So, with these frameworks, ensure that exported grapes are safe, traceable, and properly labeled before they reach Norwegian consumers. Now, we're going to talk about some phytosanitary requirements and some regulations. We talk about Regulations 396/2005. So, this it applies from the EU, establishes pesticide residue limits. For example, a pesticide as imasalil, maximum it will be 5 milligrams per kilogram. And other pesticides, chlorphyll furifis, which is not allowed, default limit 0.01 milligrams per kilograms. And the tested must be conducted by INACAL, accredited laboratories before shipment. Other phytosanitary, other phytosanitary requirement must be the 2019-2072, which Norway applies through the European Economic Area. Very important because this controls pests. For example, some pests in South America are Beripalbus chilensis, which is a Chilean false red mite, as you can see, and Ceratitis capitata, which is the Mediterranean fruit fly, very common in all the world. And well, the grapes Peruvian must not follow under this. So this phytosanitary certificate must be issued by SENASA, which is mandatory, and it has to confirm inspection and pest-free status. Grapes also, to must be shipped to Norway, cannot include leaves, stems, or oil residues, which may carry some pathogens, as I mentioned before. So, in these terms, you can export better to Norway.
In the part of category of requirement, first we have the regulatory requirement that are the rules that must be followed by law to enter the Norwegian market. First, grapes is necessary to have a phytosanitary certificate from SENASA, which confirms that grapes are free from quarantine pass. Norway also follows European Union rules, so exporters must respect the limit for pesticide residues set by Regulation EC number 3096/2005. In addition, the grapes must be traceable and go through inspection at the border. Second, the technically or quality standard explain how the grapes should look and be packaged. The UNECE FFB 19 standard apply to table grape and set rules for size, color, firmness, and overall presentation. The packaging must protect the grape from damage, allow air circulation, and include labels with the variety, country of origin, and net weight. It's also important to keep the grape cold during transport to maintain freshness. Finally, the market access requirements are not legal rules, but they are very important for selling to the top buyers. For example, Norwegian supermarkets prefer seedless grapes that are large and packed in a small container, ready to eat. They also look for certification like GlobalG.A.P, which show that the farms use good practices and cares about workers. Labels should be in Norwegian or English and must be shown where the grapes come from, helping build trust with consumers.
So today, we will explain the key standards and accreditation bodies in both countries, Peru and Norway. Let's start with Peru. And in Peru, the main authority is SENASA, which is the National Agrarian Health Service. SENASA issues the phytosanitary certificate that guarantees the eggs are free from pests and diseases, following the standards of the International Plant Protection Convention. Peruvian exporters must also apply food safety systems such as good agricultural practices, good manufacturing practices, the HACCP, and the ISO 22000. The ISO 22000 is based on the guidelines of the HACCP, which is a hazard analysis control critical points. This will help ensure hygiene, traceability, and compliance with international limits on pesticide residues. To reach high value markets, such as the Norwegian, exporters also adopt voluntary certifications like GlobalG.A.P, Fair Trade, or Rainforest Alliance. GlobalG.A.P is given by the Instituto Nacional de la Calidad in Peru, which is INACAL. It's a national accreditation body in that country. It ensures that certification entities and laboratories such as SGS or Bureau Veritas meet international standards. So, this will help a lot to get the grapes from Peru to Norway in a very good form. Country is Norway. The main authority is the Norwegian Food Safety Authority, known as Mattilsynet. Even though Norway is not part of the European Union, it follows EU food and phytosanitary rules through the European Economic Area. So grapes entering to Norway must comply with EU Regulations 2019-2072 on plant health, Regulations 852 2004 on food hygiene, Regulations 396 2005 on pesticides residues, and Regulations 1169 2011 on labeling. In addition, grapes must meet the UNICE standard FFB 19, which defines quality, size, and labeling requirements. Norway's accreditation body is called the Norwegian Accreditation, and it works together with the European Cooperation for Accreditation, or EA, which has mutual recognition agreements with Peru's INACAL. This means the Peruvian certifications are recognized in Norway, making the trade easier. So now we're going to talk about some differences and similarities between each countries. So both countries are similar goals, ensuring safe, traceable, and high quality foods for each country. However, there are a few differences. Labeling in Norway follows stricter EU rules. The Peru standards are often based on international norms, but may be less detailed than the European regulations. Still, through mutual accreditation agreements, both systems are compatible and trusted. So, in summary, to get export grapes to Peru to Norway, a company must get a phytosanitary certificate from SENASA, follow EU or EEA food safety and labeling rules, obtain recognized certifications like GlobalG.A.P, given by INACAL, and ensure that those certifications are accredited by the INACAL, which is recognized in Europe through the EA system. By meeting these standards, Peruvian grapes can enter the Norwegian market safely and competitively.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I am going to talk about the competent authorities that oversee the export process of Peruvian grapes to Norway. When we talk about competent authorities, we refer to the official institutions or organizations that make sure companies know all the legal, the sanitary, and the quality requirements before a product is going to enter for a foreign market. In this case, both Peru and Norway have specific institutions that work together to guarantee that the grapes are safe, are high quality, and compliant with international trade rules. So first, let's start with the Peruvian competent authorities, which plays a very important role in the early stage of the export process, from the vineyard to the point of shipment. So the most important is SENASA, the National Agrarian Health Service. Its main role is to protect the plant health and to guarantee that the fresh products, such as table grapes, are safe to be exported. Some of the responsibilities that they have are inspect vineyards and packing houses, monitors quarantine pest and disease, take samples to be sure that all is okay, and the most important, to accept or issue the phytosanitary certificate for each shipment. That we know it confirms that the grapes comply with the plant health and specific requirements by Norway. In simple terms, if SENASA doesn't approve, the grapes are not legally to leave Peru. It acts like an official warranty in front of foreign markets, in this case of Norway. The second one is MINCETUR, the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Tourism. It's responsible for that foreign trade policy, like negotiates and manage trade agreements, and the most important, coordinates with SENASA when importing countries set new health or documentation requirements. So MINCETUR is not like an inspect to fruit directly, but it creates the legal and trade conditions that allow companies to export this grape. Finally, we have from Peru, that is Export and Tourism Promotion Board, that is helps and support exporters to know about all of this market information, all of these legal requirements. So, like MINCETUR is not a control authority, but it helps firms align with that Norway and European markets expect. Okay, so talking about Norway, we have in the first part Mattilsynet, that is the Norwegian Food and Safety Authority. It's the central authority in Norway and it is responsible for the food safety, the animal health, and the plant health from the border to the consumer. Some of the responsibilities about grapes are the check documentation as the border, including the phytosanitary certificate. It performs the risk-based inspections and sampling. If there is a history or problems or alerts, they are going to double check that. So in practice, Mattilsynet is the authority that decides whether Peruvian grapes can enter and stay in the Norway market. Well, that we know also, Norway is part of the UA, so also it's part of the European Economic Area. That means that it applies for the UA food safety and plant health regulations. In this case, we are talking about the EFSA, that is the European Food and Safety Authority. So this one is an authority that are going to decide the rules about hygiene rules or codes, and SENASA inspections and certificates are designed to match the certification requirements with the EFSA. Well, in continue, we have the Codex Alimentarius. That is, this one are going to be like a international reference. The Codex standards guide limits for contaminants, hygiene codes, and good practice, helping align Peru's production with the high standard market expect. In the same way, we have the GlobalG.A.P, that is the proof of good agriculture practice, responsible pesticides use, and worker safety and environment care. It has become almost a must for table grapes supplied to European retailers, but we need to understand that this is also not always set by law. But many Norwegian or European supermarket chains require additional certifications, like this one that we mentioned, that is the GlobalG.A.P.
Okay. Now that my partners have presented the access requirements, relevant standards, accreditation bodies, and governance authorities, we proceed to discuss the key findings of the report and the recommendation we propose to Peruvian sport companies and policymakers. So, in total, we have six findings from the research. The first one, Peru has a strong sport position. Peru is among the world's leading grape exporters thanks to its favorable climate, agricultural technology, and counter-season production, giving it a competitive edge in the Northern Hemisphere market. Second one is the high entry standards in Norway and EU and EEA. Norway, though not an EU member, adopts economic European Union food safety labeling and hygiene regulations through the European Economic Area. Therefore, Peruvian exporters must comply with the regulation EC number 852 2004 on hygiene, regulation EC number 396 2005 on pesticides residual limits, and the regulation EU number 1169 211 on labeling and consumer information. The third one is phytosanitary and pesticide control. We have the grapes must be free from currency pests like Ceratitis capitata and Berry palpus chilensis. The compliance with strict maximum residue levels is mandatory, and exceed limits can lead to shipment rejection. And finally, the phytosanitary certificate from SENASA here in Peru is essential for export approval. The fourth finding is the institutional collaboration and accreditation systems. In Peru, SENASA, INACAL, and the COPI MINCETUR are key actors ensuring quality, accreditation, and trade compliance. In Norway, Mattilsynet supervises imports under EU-aligned regulations. And mutual recognition frameworks allow Peruvian certification accredited by INACAL to be accepted in Norway. Certification sustainability has a competitive advantages. Beyond legal requirements, voluntary standards such as GlobalG.A.P, Fair Trade, and Rainforest Alliance are increasingly demanded by European retailers. This proves sustainability, worker safety, and responsible pesticide use key values in the Norwegian market. Finally, we have the challenges of SMEs or PYMEs. Small and medium-sized exporters face high compliance costs and complex administrative burdens due to overlapping international standards. Despite this, certification and quality assurance systems are vital for long-term competitiveness. In this part, we have some recommendations for Peruvian export companies and policymakers. First of all, it's important to the stringent quality management and traceability systems. It's important to implement MIT certifications such as GlobalG.A.P, HACCP, and ISO 22,000 to meet UEA safety and sustainability expectations. It's important that invest in laboratory testing and compliance infrastructure. Use INACAL accredited laboratories to monitor pesticide reduce and guarantee conformity before shipment. So it's important to enhance collaboration with SENASA and trade authorities, to maintain continuous coordination with SENASA for inspection, certificates, and with MINCETUR to start update on evolving Norwegian and EU import regulations. For policymakers and institutions, we have some recommendations like the support of the business in compliance processes, provide financial incentives, technical training, and simplified access to certification programs for small exporters. Secondly, the stringent Peru accreditation and quality infrastructure. Expand INACAL reach and promote mutual recognition agreements to reduce duplicative testing and costs. And finally, you have the promotion of innovation and sustainable agriculture. Encourage adoption of precision agriculture, organic pest control, and climate smart practices to maintain long-term export competitiveness.
Okay, so finally, we have the conclusions of all of the topic. The first one is that Norway represents a high value and demanding market of Peruvian grapes. Norway consumers and importers focus strongly on the product safety, in a sustainability, and consistent quality. So this creates an opportunity to Peru to position its grapes as a premium product by emphasizing in freshness, flavor, and responsible farming practice. The second one, we have the Peruvian process have built a strong international credibility thanks to the continuous improvements and agricultural technology that we have right now. That means irrigation systems and post-harvest handling. By complying with European and Norway import regulations, specifically those related to the pesticide residuals, labeling, and traceability, Peru has become one of the leading suppliers of high quality table grapes to Europe. And finally, we have the sustainability and certification play a key strategic role in maintaining access to Norway. So we understand that it is really important for them to have a really good product, adopting different kind of certifications like the global JP, the organic standards, and the fair trade practice not only ensures the complaints but also adds value for the environmentally conscious consumers. So they are going to prefer a really good grape in comparison of others that doesn't have these certifications. Thank you so much for your attention. So right now we are going to add a little quiz in the video, in the description for the video, if you want to prove that you understand and probably if you are interested in the future of this topic. Thank you so much.